Hi, I'm Alexa, and we are going to do amendments 20 to 27 plus a bonus one tonight. So this is my little pocket constitution that I received on the day of my naturalization ceremony. I am a U.S. citizen, have been for several years now, and it was one of the most emotional days of my life. Shockingly, I didn't think I would have been. And then once I got there and the gravity and you see your certificate with your name and they're signing and like you take the oath and just everyone else in the room who's going through it with you and you get your constitution, you get a flag. It's a really amazing day and so powerful, and you can really feel the emotion that comes with having worked towards this goal and then being recognized as a citizen. So I have this and I do read it on occasion, and I figured this series is going strong. So let's keep going. All right, the 20th Amendment. I am not going to read all of it because it's quite lengthy, a little over a page and a half. But essentially, it changes the date of when both the electors meet to count the votes for president and vice president. It previously used to be separate. Now, obviously, we vote for a combined ticket. So it changed the date that we count the votes, and then also the date that the electors, I should say, and then the date that the term starts. So I wanted to say previously in one of my other videos, we did read it, that it was like March 15th, I think it started. So it changes the date to the term starting at noon on the 20th day of January, which is what we do currently have. This was passed in 1933. So it has been that way for over 92 years now, I guess. If I'm doing my math real quick there, which don't always get the right math when I do it that quick. So don't hold me to it. Then it talks about the Congress shall assemble at least once in every year, and such meetings shall begin at noon on the 3rd day of January, unless they shall by law appoint a different day. Section 3 talks about if at the time fixed for the beginning of the term of president, he shall have died, the VP will become president. If a president not chosen before the time affixed for the beginning of his term or a president-elect shall have failed to qualify, then the VP shall act as president until the president can be qualified. So this goes back to, we do have a two-party system that has been exploited. However, the way this is written is that we can have multiple candidates from multiple parties, and let's say no one gets to the required number, the more than 50% of the votes. Then it goes through rounds of voting of the top three, and people who were electors for like a fourth or a fifth candidate, they can then change their votes and so on and so forth. So that's what this is talking about, is the VP will act as that. Of course, the way that we currently do it, we wouldn't have a VP with 50% of the votes at that time either. So then it says, Congress may by law provide for the case wherein neither a president-elect nor a VP-elect shall have qualified, and the Congress will then declare who will act as president until such a time as the VP and the president can be qualified. So then Section 4 goes on to, in the case of death of any persons, this is where it is. The House of Representatives may choose the president from people who are qualified, and the Senate can choose a vice president whenever the right of choice shall have devolved upon them. So it splits it up. So one of them could choose, if there is no president certified, then they choose that from persons from whom the House of Representatives may choose, and then the Senate can choose the VP. So I think it's pretty good about splitting up the power. I think that one of the things we have all heard is the term checks and balances, and this just is another layer of that. There is no one person or House or Representatives or Senate or anything. There's no one branch, no one person, no one body that gets to make all of the decisions. So just another example. It talks about Section 1 and 2 will take effect on the 15th day of October following the ratification, and then it shall be inoperative unless it shall have been ratified as an amendment to the Constitution by the legislator of 3/4 of the several states within 7 years from the date of its submission. So one of the things we're going to see as we get into this is the time limit on some of these, and that comes into play for the bonus amendment that we're going to talk about. The 21st Amendment nullifies the 18th Amendment. So we sort of touched on this a little bit, but what this actually does is it takes away the amendment from the Constitution of the United States, and then Section 2 specifically says the transportation or importation into any state, territory, or possession of the United States for delivery or use therein of intoxicating liquors in violation of the laws thereof, so the state laws, that is prohibited. So it really takes the distribution, the legality, basically the laws around it were given back to the states. So Section 3 just talks about ratified within 7 years from the submission to Congress. Amendment 22. This was, and the last amendment was in 1933. December 5th, 1933 was when it was fully ratified. The 22nd Amendment was ratified February 27th of 1951. So that is 74 years ago at this point. This is talking no person shall be elected to the office of president more than twice, and no person who has held the office of president or acted as president for more than 2 years of a term to which some other person was elected president shall be elected to the president of office more than once. So this limits, if you have been, let's say the president is incapacitated, steps down, whatever, and the VP ascends to the presidency, and they are in that position for less than 2 years, they can then serve a full 2 terms. If they ascend to the position and have more than 2 years left to serve, then they can only be elected for 1 additional term. So this means that the absolute maximum, as we currently have it written in our Constitution, because of the 22nd Amendment, a person cannot be president for more than a total of 10 years. So 2 terms would be 8 plus 2 years maximum. So 2 years minus a day, basically, 10 years. Then it talks about ratified within 7 years with Section 2. So Amendment 23, this was ratified March 29th of 1961. So ratified, remember, I believe I might have just said this, but I'll say it again. Ratified means that the number of states needed to approve it in the state way they approve it has been met, and that's the day it becomes ratified. So Amendment 23 talks about the district constituting the seat of government of the United States shall appoint in such manner. So basically it's talking about Washington, D.C., and it goes on to talk about a number of electors of president and vice president equal to the whole number of senators and representatives in Congress to which the district would be entitled if it were a state. So this is really important. One of the biggest reasons that the colonists actually rebelled against the British rule was taxation without representation. So the people who live and work within Washington, D.C., up until 1961, they did not have electors who would count their vote in Congress when all of the electors from all of the states are. This gives them, even though they are not the state, it gives the people their voice and their no taxation without representation. So they are fully represented in voting for the president and vice president. And I'm guessing that this came around because as DC grew, my understanding of Washington, D.C. is that the states were fighting over where the capital should be, and they didn't want any one state to have the power of the capital being within that state. So there was land that was given from Maryland, Delaware, possibly Virginia, some form of those 3. I don't know exactly which. There was land set aside, and that became the District of Columbia. The city of Washington, District of Columbia. So that became separate entity. It is not part of any state. And so as that grew and people started living there, now it became an issue that they did not have the representation and their voice was not being counted. So it also goes on to say that they cannot have more than the number of the state with the lowest number. So it's either less or equal to. So let's say they're entitled to 50, but the state with the least amount of residents has only 49. DC would only get 49 as well. I don't think that's the number. I think it's much smaller, but just an example. And then it goes on to say Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. No time limit on ratification for this. All right, Amendment 24. The rights of citizens of the United States to vote in any primary or other election for president or vice president, for electors for president or vice president, or for senator or representative in Congress shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state by reason of failure to pay any poll tax or other tax. Section 2, Congress shall have power to enforce this by appropriate legislation. This was ratified. The 24th Amendment was ratified January 23rd, 1964. This amendment is the basis for all of the arguments against requiring any type of ID, because we charge for IDs, and that can then be used by bad faith actors to disenfranchise people who do not have the money to pay for the ID. Now, I believe some states might do like a state ID, like we pay for our driver's license and that counts, but I think that there's a lot going on right now in terms of, then they claim it's election security, but it's not. It's disenfranchisement rolled up in another name. This no poll tax or other tax cannot be, unless they put an amendment and repeal the 24th Amendment, they cannot do certain things. I also think there was probably stuff going on where it was also probably being used to gerrymander by race and implementing taxes that they knew that people couldn't pay right away. So then they always had a bill, and then they would say, well, if you haven't paid your bill, you can't vote. Like, so this was taking that gerrymandering piece out as well. It's a right to vote. The government should not be making it harder for us. They should be making it easier for us. That is my opinion. I do think that people should know what is going on. They should not just whose name have I heard the most, or hear one debate and think that that's what it is. And I think that we need to take it the responsibility of investigating the actual policies that people are proposing and what those policies are actually going to do to the country. A lot of the policies that get proposed in every election that I have ever paid attention to, they've been implemented somewhere else. They've been implemented in other countries. They've been implemented in this country, and we've seen results from it. That data is, what is it? The CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, I think it is. They literally will come out and tell you what the economic policies proposed by candidates are going to do based on what they've done in the past. They know what these things are going to, how this is going to affect stuff. The same with any policy. There's different independent commissions. They're not even government agencies that will review these. And we as people, we should be taking it very seriously. We should not just be like, well, I guess I'll go today and decide when I get there. Like, you should have thought about it ahead of time. And I'll get off my high horse, but I think it's obvious I believe in responsibility and really understanding the data, no matter the topic. With all of the videos I do, with the resources I share, I think that's pretty obvious that I take that pretty seriously. All right, the 25th Amendment. We heard a lot about this back in 2020. In the case of the removal of the president from office or of his death or resignation, the vice president shall become president. Whenever there is a vacancy in the office of the vice president, the president shall nominate a VP who shall take office upon confirmation by a majority vote of both houses of Congress. So it's really setting up the succession and how that occurs. Then Section 3 talks about the president sending to the president pro tempore of the Senate and Speaker of House of Representatives that he's unable to discharge powers. Then until he tells them he's well again and can do it, the VP will be acting president. Section 4 is whenever the vice president and the majority of either the principal offices of the executive departments or of such other body as Congress may by law provide, transmit to the President pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives their written declaration that the President is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, the Vice President shall immediately assume the powers and duties of the office of acting President. Then it lays out that the President can dispute that he is not, like he can dispute that they're saying he's incapacitated, but he's like, no, I'm not. And then after that, they can, again, the VP and the majority of the offices can then say, yeah, no, he's lying to you. He's so far I'm saying he because we've never had a female president. He's lying to you. He's definitely incapacitated, at which point the Senate and the Speaker of the House will essentially assemble within 48 hours and decide the issue. And then if 21 days after the president says, yeah, I am fit, the VP and the offices have not then said it to the House, it just talks about what the various things are, who then gets to be president, and so on and so forth. That's a lot more complicated than it was being made out as back in very early 2020. And to get 2/3 of both the House of Representatives and the Senate to agree that a president is not capable of discharging their duties, especially in such 50-50 kind of times, would definitely be difficult. All right, then Amendment 26, the right of citizens of the United States who are 18 of age or older to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of age. Congress shall have power to enforce this by appropriate legislation. This was ratified on July 1st, 71, so this simply changes voting age from 21 down to 18. And then Amendment 27. No law varying the compensation for the services of the senators and representatives shall take effect until an election of representatives shall have intervened. So this means that the people who vote for, let's say, a salary increase or something like that, it doesn't automatically apply to them. They have to be voted back in. So it almost gives a check and balance on them doing that, in that the people can then say, yeah, no, we don't like that, and we're not voting for you again, and vote someone else in who can then change it back. Obviously, it says representatives, election of representatives, so that's every 2 years. Senate is every 6 years, and it's about 1/3 of the senators come up for election every 2 years, so that you would still have at least 2/3 of the senators in their seats, but at least this way, it's a lot harder to get through it. All right, this was actually, I'm just reading the subscript here. Congress submitted the text of the 27th Amendment to the states as part of the proposed Bill of Rights on September 25th, 1789. The amendment was not ratified together with the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, you can see my original video on that, which became effective on December 15th, 1791. The 27th Amendment was ratified on May 7th, 1992 by vote of Michigan. So Michigan was the state that ratified that, making it 2/3, 3/4. I think it's whatever the rule is, however many. That's amazing that it was 1992. from 1789, 1889, 1989. That is 203 years that it took to get ratified. So the bonus amendment is the Equal Rights Amendment. And the Equal Rights Amendment, the text of it is, sorry, I just changed the page. Let me go back. It is, this is embarrassing. I had it pulled up and then I had changed the page. Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. So this is one of those where Congress had added the Section 2 that it should be ratified by a certain date, by 2/3 or 3/4 of the states by a certain date. That date was actually moved out multiple times, or at least once, but I think 2 or 3. It finally got if I'm remembering correctly, we finally got 2/3 of the states to ratify this last year. Now, there are some states who have tried to claim that they are rescinding their ratification. There are other states who are claiming that because it wasn't done in the time limit, or maybe some of the same states, that this then does not actually count as a ratified amendment. However, the Constitution and the process for doing amendments does not at all give ways to rescind ratification of an amendment. If you don't like it, you then have to do a new amendment and get that re-ratified by a full 2/3 of 3/4 of the states. It also does not require them to be ratified within a time limit, which is why we can see the 27th Amendment was 203 years. So the argument that probably should go through the courts, but really won't at any time soon, based on not just the Constitution, not just the other amendments, but based on also case law for other amendments that states tried to rescind their ratification, established precedent means that the 28th Amendment should be published, the Equal Rights Amendment. And this is something I do feel very strongly about. I think that the language of it could be a lot stronger. But obviously it has not been published. And I got this, even if it was published, I got this before the ratification last year. However, I do not see, I see society doing little sort of like cha-cha moves. Like we go forwards in progress and then we go back a little bit. Then we go forwards and we go back a little bit. So I do think that there is a real visible attack on rights that are constitutionally guaranteed through the process that we have, the legally and binding way that we agree, and that if we don't agree and we don't abide by the rules, then our society falls into lawlessness. We have an established way of doing things, and by this established way, that by all accounts, by people, I will leave a link to the Equal Rights Amendment and all of the history on ratification and time limits and all of that. It should be in here. There should be no law that affects one group of people based on their sex and not another. There should be nothing that abridges someone's rights based on their sex. It's really, from a learner point of view, simply looking at societies, and not just America, but looking at other countries and looking through history and looking at the power plays and how progress does work, how there is always sort of like a pendulum, sort of like we pull it back a bit, then we move forward, pull it back a bit, move forward. That sort of seesawing action of progress. I'm fascinated by that. unfortunately, we're living in a time where simply being an observer is not really an option anymore. And so one of the things that I am doing is speaking out more and exercising my rights under this amazing written document that is clear and so careful in the words and language that it uses in each of the first the Constitution and then the amendments, right? So I hope that you have learned something from this. I don't think that we all need to be constitutional scholars. We have those out there. We have lawyers who specialize in cases based on different amendments. We need to listen to the experts. There are people who spend their entire life studying this, just like there are people who spend their entire lives farming and learning how to farm well, and people who are builders and spend their lives learning how to build and how to get better buildings and building materials. Just like we have doctors who spend their whole lives dedicated to a subject. We have chefs dedicated to a subject. We have so many people who, and we all sort of have our areas of expertise, and we know that an expert in their field is worth listening to. So I believe I have one more video in this series. It'll come out probably next week, and it is to go over I think it's articles 4 to 7 of the actual Constitution in a little bit more depth. It is super cold here today. We went from 79, 80 on the weekend to snow today. So I have been wearing my it's actually a robe, but I wear it like a snuggie. Is that what they call them? If you made it this far, thank you. As always, I appreciate you. I'll see you on the next one. Be kind to yourself.